Good to see you all here. Jay, welcome. Oatmeal and blueberries, excellent. I hear the marathon champions as the breakfast of marathon champions. So well done, Jay Holder. My name is Sergio Avila. I am a board member with the Running Industry Diversity Coalition. Very excited, happy to welcome you all to this session titled Creating an Inclusive Event, Part 2. And this is the COOKOUT edition. We have a great panel for you and a great conversation. Everybody can engage in conversation. We will make sure to have time for you all to interact with our panelists. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos. Welcome, everyone. So first off, a little bit of house cleaning. We want to let you know that we are recording this panel. It'll be shared later in our media, but we want to make sure that you all know we are recording. And allow me to share a little bit of the mission and the vision of the Running Industry Diversity Coalition from heretofore RIDC. RIDC unites the running industry to improve the inclusion, visibility, and access for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And we are focused on two specific goals: to grow the number of committed and action-oriented members of the RIDC, and to grow the pipeline of Black, Indigenous, and people of color professionals, leaders, and owners in the running industry. So if you are here for that, you are in the right place. Today's workshop will be facilitated by the one and only Abigail Hollie, who has a lot of great ideas and vision to share with you all. She is the program manager at RIDC, and I would like to welcome our panelists. Victoria Law, a community leader who started the national movement called Chinatown Runners. They host pop-up runs in Chinatowns across the country. Welcome, Victoria. Anthony White is Director of Brand Partnerships and Retail Activations for Charm City Run, and a host of the Baltimore Women's Classic 5K. Thank you for being here, Anthony. Erica Edwards O'Neill is Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Corporate Social Responsibility with the New York Road Runners and hosts the New York City Marathon. A pleasure to have you with us, Erica. And last but not least, Lynn Le, Director Corporate Communications for Strava, hosts of the tech conference Camp Strava. Thank you all for being here with us. It is a pleasure to partner with you through the RIDC. And if we can give you a little bit of context into this call, this event, this is the 2.0 version of our first workshop. And if you want to learn more, you want to get more introductory information, we encourage you to go back and watch a recording on YouTube that we will share the link on the chat. The Running Industry Diversity Coalition has grown through our partnerships with our member organizations. And because of this, we are able to not only provide education on building an inclusive event, but we could host one ourselves, put our advice to the test and the tools. So we are going to share with you today a brief recap of this event. What was the essence of it? What kind of food, what kind of music, what kind of media, photo, dancing, and community happened at that event. And for that, it is my absolute pleasure to pass it to Abigail to lead us through this conversation. Welcome, everyone, again, and thank you, Abigail.
Thank you so much, Sergio. Woo! This is my first time not being able to see all the participants on a webinar. We're trying to be fancy now, so leave in the chat. You got to be reactive. If you like something, let us know. If you love what someone said, say, I love that, so I can tell that you're here. But welcome. Thank you for the intro. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty behind an event. So like Sergio mentioned, if you're looking for a more introductory call about how to start your own inclusive event, why it's important to have these certain items that we're going to go through, I encourage you to go back to that first YouTube video, which I'll link in the chat eventually. But what we didn't talk about on that first workshop was the concept behind your event. So a key part of fostering inclusion is not tacking it on at the back end of your planning. That is like a key mistake that people often make. They start with the idea of the event they want or what they want to do. And then somewhere halfway along planning, they go, oh, we should run this by our DEI council or whatever to make sure that we're not leaving someone out. So before you even get into that, I encourage you to ask yourself these two questions. Number one, what kind of organization do you want to be? And number two, what kind of impact do you want to have? Now, I found it helpful for the cookout specifically to sort of write a vision statement that I always revisited throughout planning. This is taken literally from our planning doc from the first page of the first day of planning with my coworker, Betsy. I wrote this vision statement and it said, typically at events like the running event, which is where we hosted the cookout, there is no one event or one place that centers people of color first. This event is intentionally created as a joyful, celebratory, and energizing space for people to gather. This is for the people we do the work for and our engaged allies in the running industry that are doing this work with us. This is a party for everyone that brings us together to gather with food, music, and to empower the diversity and cultures that are here. Now, the challenge with this is, even with these two questions, if you are looking at an event, for example, if you work with a marathon that's been existing for the past 10 years, your answers to these questions might evolve. The groups that you want to reach, the impact that you might want to have can change. So it's important to revisit this every time. Erica, I'm going to ask you a question on this. You, in a conversation I had with you, you've offered some really helpful language that can be another way of thinking around these questions to ensure that inclusivity is brought into perspective and to help figure out essentially who's being left out of the conversation. So could you expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Also, again, thank you for having me and welcome y'all. I'm happy to be a part of the conversation. So one of the things is that despite the size of your organization, I think it's a year-round process that to ensure that it's an inside-out approach, that you've spent the year educating, giving your team, no matter the size, the tools necessary to help them center equity, because it doesn't necessarily come naturally, right? To think about those who've been historically underrepresented, undervalued, underheard, and not centered. Asking yourself some key questions. Who's at the forefront? Who are we considering? Who might our action or inaction benefit or burden? And who have we not even thought about, right? So it's twofold. It requires both the awareness, education, and then each member of the team is getting the opportunity to develop that muscle for themselves. And I'll give a quick story here. I often say and do a training called baked in, like baking a cake, equity. The notion that equity has to be a center ingredient, not something that is slathered on at the end like icing. And Abigail, though we didn't discuss this, that was my experience years ago. I'd say I actually had a rather animated conversation at a previous organization where it said, you just keep coming to me with things that are fully baked, right? I need to be a key ingredient or the considerations at the beginning of the table, at the thought process, because otherwise you build something, you bake it, and we're saying, no, you left all of these things out. So that's really the perspective there. And that means, I know each organization in different sizes, that inside out often comes from a place where you're saying, how are we offering care and concern or centering people externally where we haven't done the work internally? About your staff, your volunteers, your team, how are you caring for and centering those folks, their experiences? So that also requires your policies, processes, and practices. I have a lot of words, so feel free to stop me.
No, that was wonderful. That was great. And I think people in the chat are loving it too. And beyond just exactly what you said, embedding it into the full planning process. But beyond just it being about, a policy, not that that's what you were saying at all, but about it being just a policy, what I'm hearing is it's about the story you're trying to create with the event too, the people you want to reach, the genuine, like you said, care and concern. So I'm going to ask another person, Victoria, I think you have such a great example of how to do that on a community level, because you have such a powerful story that came behind the origins of Chinatown Runners that fuels every pop-up run that you host. So could you just share a little bit about that story and how it's served as that North Star for you?
Yeah. So again, first of all, thanks so much for having me and inviting me to the conversation. I'm excited to be here. Chinatown Runners was born in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, when anti-Asian hate crimes were on the rise. And I myself, as an individual, really needed to find a way to give back and figure out how could I combat anti-Asian sentiment in my own way. I've been blessed to spend a decade now in New York, but I've also traveled all around the world and throughout the United States, and met many different running communities and linked up and made friends with many run crews and run leadership members. So with that came the idea of what I call building threads of empathy. My concept behind Chinatown Runners was to bring people who may not typically spend a significant amount of time in AAPI-centric neighborhoods, bring them to the neighborhoods and kind of focus not on the run or the physicality of that event itself, but more so on the journey there. So all of our runs include cultural pit stops, or we'll highlight, a mural, a piece of artwork, a historical landmark. And it's really to sort of weave that story of the community and the people that reside there. And to me, that was the ethos of what Chinatown Runners was built on, was creating human connection with one another. And that was the way that I saw to bridge that gap between people who may not seem familiar to you or in your immediate orbit. Why would you care about them when hate crimes impact them if you don't have a direct relationship with them necessarily? So for me, hosting pop-up events and bringing people to these communities is a way to build those introductory relationships with these people and recognizing them as integral and human and a part of the patchwork of the city that we live in. So we also are able to cross state borders because of the time that I've spent running with different run clubs throughout the different states and different countries, and then inviting them to host their own Chinatown Runners specific events and helping them sort of network through us so that it becomes a decentralized movement.
Fantastic. If you all don't get anything else, start with the first things we just said. If you're missing that human connection, anything else I share in this workshop is going to be inconsequential. You're not going to get it right because you're using inclusion as a checkbox rather than having genuine care about the communities you want to reach. Moving forward, advisory council. We talked about why they're so important to have in the last workshop. So again, go watch it. But if you have already watched it, this was the advisory council for the cookout. Every tool from that previous workshop, we applied it for the cookout to evaluate where its strengths were and what needed to improve. Our advisory council was individuals from our board at the RIDC, specifically individuals who had a skill or a interest in community engagement, in fundraising, or in design, because we also had merch. You see it. It's something on the back too. You see it. So this was our advisory council. It also had staff members and of course our amazing executive director, Kiera Smalls. So some quick do's and don'ts for our advisory council. If you think of any, audience, please add them in the chat. Go ahead and start listing them here. But number one, ask yourself, do they represent the audience that I want to reach? If your council or the people informing your event don't reflect the people you want to reach at your event, that's exactly who you're going to see show up. It's so true. And then, do they challenge the status quo? Are they going to ask the right questions? If you have 4 people, this literally happened with the cookout. If you have 4 people saying, oh, that's going to be great, I love that vendor, or I love this venue, are you going to have that one person, at least on your call, who goes, Yeah, but I think that only reaches one demographic. I think we should keep looking. Are they going to challenge you in, even if it's not the most convenient? However, as important representation is, representation is for this council, you don't want to add someone just for the sake of adding them. Don't just go find that one Black employee and go, oh, you are in that community. Do you want to give your input on this event that you have no interest in or have done no previous work around? Lynn, you and I have talked a little bit about this before in other contexts, but I'm wondering if you could speak on how seeking someone out based on race or background might start as a genuine effort to find representation, but can also turn into tokenism.
Yeah, I think this is something that, excuse me, some of us don't intentionally do, but sometimes ends up happening. I believe everyone has good intentions when they're looking at their panel to try to diversify the guest speakers or the SMEs, right? We all work in service of creating safe spaces and amplifying voices from underrepresented communities. So my guidance is when you think about the makeup of your guest speakers or the panels, I often start with like, who is the subject matter expert? What is the potential impact that they will bring? Or what will we learn from this person? What will our attendees take away? And then use this information when you're reaching out to them to invite them, and use it as the why of your reach out. So, the race is not a qualifying factor. Your credentials are, your experiences, your story is. And I think that's really where that extra effort really makes us understand if this is an inclusive event, or unfortunately, I think we also all intuitively know when it's a check the box exercise, which we don't want.
Any other panelists want to comment on that? I saw someone in the audience Katie said, do actually listen to what advisors have to say. I think that goes into tokenism. If you're just going to add someone just to add them, you're probably not actually going to value their opinions and seek them out.
Can I add one more thing?
Please.
I also think it's very important that people of underrepresented communities are not just always at the DEI panels. We are subject matter experts in other topics as well. So this extends beyond topics of equity and inclusion, but also like anything else that we are working on or what we're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in really quickly? I just wanted to add one other piece, because I think what you touched on is that notion of you need to be willing to be challenged, right? And so otherwise you might get the person of a particular background or from a particular community that is going to be the most palatable, right? The most agreeable, the person most like you. And so it is that, like, it does require some courage to say, actually, I don't like your plan, to bring someone to the table who might say, I don't like it at all. So I think we take that for granted, the notion that people often are like, well, I may be that person. So.
Great addition. On that same topic, don't then give up on finding the right person. So if you are looking for representation on your advisory council and the people who are in your immediate circle may not meet that skill or that particular interest, seek outside of your immediate circle. Can you offer a monetary compensation for their time? If you can't offer money for their advice, can you offer them free entry to your event? Can you offer them registration for your race? What else can you offer? Or can you hire someone else? For the cookout, we hired an event planner because we didn't know the Austin community well enough. So we weren't going to be experts on that. And we didn't have anybody around who was. So that's just another point. Also, for our attendees, if you have a question, please there's a Q&A feature. You can hit chat and then there's like a Q&A option. Add your question there. We want to make sure we don't miss it, but we might not get to it until towards the end. Now, a challenge on the advisory council is, it actually came up before, that the person who's ultimately leading the event, your own natural biases, your own implicit biases are going to affect, no matter if you have an amazing council, they're going to affect the opinions you catch, the opinions you value, and the people that you seek out. So the best thing that you can do, which was for me in this case, spend time with the communities you want to reach. You're not going to host an inclusive event if you have no idea about the people you're trying to include. So you can work, this is a year-round activity, challenge your own biases, go get to know the people you want to reach and get to know their cultures. Now we're going to move into partnerships. How can you take your partnerships to the next level? Well, these were our amazing partners for the cookout. Thank you all. You made it happen. And we called them our stride leaders because that's exactly what they are. They take action and took it to the next level. And part of that was their support of this event. We found partners that are willing to take action. We wanted action-oriented organizations to work with that don't just have inclusion around their one-day partnership with us at this one event, but that showed a consistency in their commitment to our mission and our values year-round. Whether that was that they're on a superstar scale and they're doing external DEI work that's so amazing, or that at least internally they have a commitment, they have DEI goals that they're committed to, and that they were willing to make an ongoing commitment to working with the RIDC. We didn't want it to just be a one-day partnership. We found it was more valuable when we could stretch that out into a year-long commitment. Also, I think the structure of your funding can promote inclusion. So the way we set up funding was that their dollars didn't just go to paying for supporting the organization or paying for the event. It also paved the way for BIPOC, being Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the running community, in the Austin community and at TRE, to have free entry into the cookout. That's what we wanted to make sure that they were there. I'm going to ask DeAnthony a question that I'm also going to ask you, audience. For yourself, what do you want to see in an ideal partnership? We're learning from you, so I actually do want you to answer this question. When we challenge our partners, what do you want to see in a partner? And then what kind of partner, if you are in a position to be a partner, what kind of partner do you want to be? DeAnthony, I know you all have done a great job finding lucrative partnerships like you had with New Balance for the Baltimore Women's Classic, but you've also been a great partner to your community. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. Glad to be here, guys. So Baltimore Women's Classic, we've been putting on the Baltimore Women's Classic. It's a 3,000 runners race for the past 8 years now. New Balance is our key headline sponsor for this event. And one of the main things we look for is your intention of how you show up for our runners, right? So from the store level, and the most important aspects of the events and smaller ancillary things that lead up into the main event, right? So whether it's our runners, our training groups, and specific one-off events or whatever that lead into it to drive traffic for the race as well too. But what is your intention and how are you showing up, and how are we in alignment with creating this mutually beneficial partnership that we want to stay in alignment with as well too? And you mentioned, and New Balance has been doing that. They've been exemplary of that for the past, 8 years now. And sustainability. I think you don't go that long with being a partner without being a partner if you're not consistent in those key things or whatever that makes the race successful, and also creates a valuable experience around the runners that are attending that race as well too. The type of partner that we want to be for partners. Black Girls Run is another organization that we teamed up with, and JL Alexander, we connected with her about a partnership. And to Erica's point about making this, she mentioned something earlier about the baked in concept, right? And here's Black Girls Run, which is 250,000 plus across the nation, very heavily involved in the community and representation as far as for Black women. And Baltimore Women's Classic is focused around women, empowering women, staying active. And the main thing that is key is that we're looking to increase our representation in the race for specifically with Black women as well. And Black Girls Run, being a partner for them is saying, hey, here's the platform. Here are the opportunities that have basically were created for us to increase our runners, but we want to put Black girls running in a position to maximize on the success, increase representation, how they deem it necessary, and what does that look like leading into that event as well too. So whether that's Black girls run specific events, training groups in which New Balance supports as well, discounted registrations in which you mentioned, Abigail. Aside from that, also on site activating, being able to sell their merchandise, and then they become a core hub for the women in which they've attributed to hundreds of registrations for us for the Baltimore Women's Classic as well. So being able to have this 360-degree partnership with an organization and be there, and really not necessarily be there, like they have a plan, they know how to implement that plan and move about it. I think that's key when we're trying to be the best partner for someone else as well too. So
Great points. I'm curious if any other panelists had something on that topic of just how you've been able to serve as a great partner or the types of partnerships you're looking for.
I can talk on, like, from a Strava perspective, we have different teams working on partnerships, but I can tell you as an organization, a majority of the work we do is in service of our mission, which is to motivate the world to live their best active lives. But a lot of what drives those decision-making and part of the partnership process is, do their values align with our values? And that's a really important factor when we're looking at partnerships, because we don't want to work with someone who doesn't align with what our community needs are and ultimately who we are building for.
I can speak to it on a different level. I don't know if this would be considered off topic, but Chinatown Runners considers every run club that we work with as a partner. And most of our events are partnerships with other run clubs, specifically because the mission is to bring other run clubs that don't run through Asian neighborhoods to these Asian neighborhoods. So what I specifically look for when I'm partnering with different running communities and run clubs is an alignment on our values, obviously, and of course, the ability to ensure that all of the guests at our event feel like it's a safe space. So if the run clubs have a mission statement of some sort, I often look for that as well to make sure that our values are in alignment, and that the runs that we create are inclusive of every race, every pace, every shape, every body, and every ability. So on that level, for our partnerships, I specifically look for a lot of mission alignment and ability to build the events equally across the board together.
And we talk about alignment. Another organization as well that I think it has made a significant impact, and we brought them on as a partner in 2017, was House of Ruth. It's a nonprofit organization, and Victoria was mentioning alignment, right? So they focus on eliminating domestic violence and homelessness within the Baltimore and just the Maryland community as a whole. But alignment in the sense of they're looking to empower anyone that's experiencing that type of trauma and to bounce back in a sense as well too, with the programs that they offer, whether it's through childcare, housing, and also counseling as well too, with these specific programs that they offer. But we partner with them. The partnership with them is not necessarily, you can have the transactional aspect, right? Where, it's a donation and then we match that donation and you can wipe your hands clean with it then. But it's about more so immersing yourself in their world, in the sense of, House of Ruth employees or anyone that's involved with them on the volunteer side, they come and volunteer at our race and immerse themselves into Baltimore Women's Classic world, and they're able to get their message out as well too, and speak on exactly what it is they're doing in the community. Because that's one of the main things, as far as when you mentioned in the question earlier about what type of partner do we want to be for these organizations, right? But having an understanding and having them immersed into the event, even if they never ran a race before, you know, it's still about being in alignment to where they can speak to something. Because again, Baltimore Women's Classic is about women empowering women, and everyone is essentially, you know, accomplishing their goals, their long-term goals with it. And these are partners that have been with us for years and doing so. So
Golden, those answers. I think a big part of what you guys, all of you all are saying is the creativity aspect with partnerships might be a challenge of like, really, how can I stretch this opportunity? But you all just gave real world examples of what you can do. One, if I'm being a partner to someone, like you mentioned with House of Ruth, can I invite them also to the event? Can I show who we're working with and our audience what's important to us and the people of the communities we want to reach? Victoria, your point about inviting run clubs, those partnerships can completely change the feel of an event. They create inclusion from the start because you've already made sure you've invited a diverse group of people there, so that when you invite other runners, there's someone there like them that represents them. And then also that creativity about the funding from partnerships. Can you use it to give other people registration access? Can you give it access and widen access to your event like we did with the cookout? So I know in general, there is a challenge with you need dollars to make an event go. So everybody might not be 100% in alignment with everything that you do. But at the same time, using partnerships to maybe it gives you a wider access to different venues, so that if accessibility is an issue, can a partner pay the way to add an interpreter at your event? Can they pay the way to make sure it's wheelchair accessible at your event? There's all types of ways that you can utilize these partnerships specifically for inclusion. And what you said, D'Anthony, about House of Ruth leads us really well into outreach as well. Oopsies, scoot back. So for the cookout, outreach and vendors. Now, these can be the difference between a diverse event and an inclusive event. These are the two categories I loved when getting into the cookout. Outreach, I would say, is the diversity behind your event. If I really summarized it, that's who you can bring there. This is taking the time to intentionally invite the communities you want to reach. So, for example, for the RIDC, one of our specific goals, strategic goals, which we talked about at the beginning of this workshop, is to grow the pipeline of BIPOC professionals, leaders, and owners in the running industry. So for the cookout, we invited our 25 scholarship recipients, who we also brought to TRE, fully funded thanks to the help of ON. They were able to attend TRE that 3 days and go to the cookout, which was a great opportunity to increase visibility for them, to provide a networking platform. And a lot of the planning around the cookout was to make an environment where they could thrive, where they could have fun, where they could celebrate, where they could be, they could shine. We also wrote a list, a literal spreadsheet list of run club leaders we wanted to invite, individual community leaders in the Austin community that we wanted to be there, BIPOC individuals from the TRE running industry community that we wanted to make sure we're there. So it's just taking that like extra step to make sure you're thinking of them and reaching outreach. And then vendors is the inclusivity part. This is how you make sure once you've invited them, there's something there at your event for them. These vendors can be a great opportunity for that. This isn't just about, I think when people think about inclusion with food, for example, they think of gluten-free and vegan options, and that's about it. They don't think about seasoning and flavors or parts of the world that you got food from. That also says inclusion. You don't think about your music. What kind of songs are you playing that says, hey, we know you're here and we want your anthem to play at this event? And then again, back to the accessible venue. If I can't get into your venue, I'm not going to go. And accessibility to a venue doesn't just mean wheelchair access. It also means, is it going to cost me a lot to get there? Is it in an area surrounded by Confederate flags? I don't want to go there. You have to think about what's around your venue. All of those things are part of it. Now, depending on the area where you want to host your event, ideally, you can also have inclusion with the vendors that you use. So they can be BIPOC owned. That would be wonderful. But depending on the area that you're in, there's usually a deficit of BIPOC owned businesses for a list of other reasons that you can check out our research and other workshops to talk about. But you can get creative. If the venue allows you to bring in your own caterer, maybe the venue itself isn't the most inclusive, but maybe the food can be, or the music can be. If the venue will stock BIPOC owned liquors, that was like a thing for our bar, to stock a BIPOC owned liquor brand, something like that, just to take that extra step. Victoria, the movement that you have led with Chinatown Runners feeds on outreach. I think you do a fantastic job with outreach in person and virtually through social media. So could you talk a bit about, one, how in person you support the communities that you're running through, and then also virtually how you manage to foster community, even if people can't physically come to the runs?
Yeah, so in 2021, the pandemic was still kind of at its peak. So an important layer of Chinatown Runners was the ability to connect through us virtually, because not everybody was super comfortable with in-person events yet, especially at scale. So we created the hashtag Chinatown Runners, pushed heavily on social media. I tagged like every single run club that I could think of, and really invited people to, if they couldn't or weren't comfortable running with us physically in person, to do a run of their own to an AAPI-centric neighborhood, or even just an AAPI-owned business, and make that their Chinatown run. And then use the hashtag. I'm on social media probably more than I should be on in a healthy way. So I'm always trying to check our socials to make sure that if people are tagging us or people are using the hashtag, that I'm amplifying them and resharing and giving them their moment in the spotlight as well, so that they feel truly a part of Chinatown Runners. And every surface that we showcase our mission on, I reinforce the fact that it's not a crew or a run club, it's a movement, which means anybody and everybody is invited to be a part of it. So in that sense, social media has served us well. For how we service the communities, we're literally bringing bodies into the neighborhoods, and that was the ethos of Chinatown Runners to begin with. It was bringing people back to the neighborhoods that, through xenophobia or the sort of fear mongering that COVID-19 created against Asian neighborhoods. I wanted to invite people to come back to these neighborhoods and get in touch with the people that were still there, and realize it's not so scary, and bring foot traffic back to the Chinatowns so that people could enjoy like the little mom and pop corner shops. A lot of our events also end specifically at a restaurant or a small locally owned business. And the point of that is specifically to highlight restaurants that people may have never heard of, like hidden gems. We've done a run to, one of my favorites was a run to the first female Asian owned bookstore in the United States. It's here in New York City. It's called You and Me Books. I know the owner, Lucy. She's amazing. We hosted a run to her bookstore during the first year of its inception to just introduce people to like this tiny bookstore in Chinatown that was highlighting BIPOC authors and like really truly doing something unique by stocking authors specifically that were BIPOC and Asian. And just highlighting small businesses that people, may not necessarily have on their radar, because we understand that everybody is specifically focused on AAPI-centric neighborhoods, but our events, give that business a moment to shine and also introduce people to potentially like their new favorite restaurant or new favorite bookstore. So we quite literally bring bodies to businesses, and I'm very proud of that.
I hope you all are taking notes, because we're giving real tools. We're giving you the exact answers. Two main things Victoria just gave you is, if you are like, well, financial things are a limitation. I'm just a run club leader. I'm just trying to start a movement. How can I get outreach other than, I can't maybe have a caterer for my event. Okay, well, run them to the food. Take them to the business itself. That was a fantastic suggestion. If your outreach is limited because event capacity, maybe you can't host 500, 600 people, can you use virtual platforms like Victoria uses all the time for Chinatown Runners on social media? They do an amazing job. Can you live stream something? Can you post about it so people can still feel like they're a part of your event? I'm curious to other panelists, do you have any examples about fantastic outreach opportunities or examples of a vendor relationship that really changed the tone of your event, that really brought in that inclusivity factor?
I have like a real life example, unless Erica, you'd like to go first. Sorry, I saw you come off of mute. So during the Women's World Cup, Strava hosted a watch party for the US women's soccer team. Unfortunately, it was like the round 16, so it was an overnight game. But the really cool component was we had a community run paired with the watch party overnight. So we were creating a safe space for people to come watch the party. The two vendors that we were able to partner with were both minority-owned women businesses. So we partnered with BibRay for the community event, and they did a fantastic job. But the plus up, I would say, is that we hosted it at a bar called the Sports Brawl in Portland, Oregon, which is the only bar in the world that shows women's sports only, and it's owned by a woman named Jenny Nguyen. So by working with these women-led businesses, it was just a really nice touch to the event where we were elevating women's sport and rallying the community to come support the US women's soccer team. So it was just I would say a nice touch and a very tactical way of pulling the thread of support all the way through during the event.
I love both of those examples. I'm just jumping in, and I'm going to steal that phrase, that pulling the thread. I love that. And just I was going to jump in for the example of what I've been extraordinarily proud of the work we've been doing in terms of accessibility. So you're starting to notice at our marquee events the inclusion of ASL interpreters. But when we went to select this vendor, we were intentional about either selecting BIPOC woman-owned business to provide the accessibility. And looking in particular, having our teams shift their thinking for when we're going into neighborhoods that we're attempting to, yes, sure, we're bringing bodies into the neighborhood, but that we are using local owned caterers, coffee shops. And even if the notion is that like the big brand name is who we've used, I'm not saying making 100% shift, but using, 20% of the time, right? A small shift to intentionally seeking out, and part of that being connected to the community. If there's a BIPOC-owned, woman-owned, LGBTQI-owned business, and they're like not accustomed to opening up at 6 a.m., I bet if you say, you know what, could you open at 6 a.m.? We need to buy coffee and donuts for a couple of hundred people. Like it takes another step. But one of the things we were initially in doing this effort, it wasn't without challenges, but it did require going back to what I think Victoria, you said, like relationship, community. If we're centering community, we're like, hey, listen, this is a great opportunity to expand your business. Maybe you're not always open on Saturday or whatever this day is at 5 a.m., but could you be open? And then we could use you more. And thinking about really, it is not that it's not great for the change, but the things that's a drop in a bucket for a change can truly be life-changing for smaller community-based businesses. And so in terms of our catering, but also for our staff gifts, we look at anything we're doing, we try to include diverse representation to just model it, right? Thinking about, and we talk to our staff and team members to talk about thinking about your sphere of influence, right? So you may not be able to make a $50,000 difference, but your own catering, your own car, like the small to the large. So.
Yeah, I wanted to, two things came to mind while you guys were talking, and then like a third thing came to mind when Erica had mentioned like relationship building and businesses like making themselves accessible to us. So on that specific note, one of our recent runs in December, we actually ran to this really tiny hole in the wall Taiwanese restaurant in Brooklyn, in like the edge of this very hipster neighborhood that you would not expect any Asian restaurants, let alone like a Taiwanese like restaurant to be there. The owner, Doris, she opened her doors to us on a Sunday, which was her only day off. And she gave us the space. She let us take it over. It was like 40, 50 of us in this tiny hole in the wall restaurant. And she just really embraced us. And we also allowed her to talk about her story of how she started as a street food cart. And then, you know, through Street Vendor Project, which is an organization here in New York that supports street vendors, through their sort of support and funding, she was able to build a brick and mortar. So giving her the platform to share her story also allowed us to help fundraise for Street Vendor Project. The other thing I wanted to talk about is every Chinatown Runners event, we have a layer of fundraising underneath it. No money actually passes through me or my hands. We promote and ask for people's donations to a specific charity or organization that is usually thematically tied to the event. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on when I was reading through the chat about, you know, how do we continue fostering connectivity virtually? I produce merchandise. I am a graphic designer, so luckily I don't have to hire a graphic designer. And I create Chinatown Runners merchandise that's actually drop shipped and sold. It's print on demand, so people can order it regardless of where they're located in the world. So you don't have to come to one of our runs in New York, or locally, if we're hosting a run, like you can order a Chinatown Runners sweater or hoodie or sticker and feel like you can represent us and be a part of us. And that was a very intentional move on my part, because I didn't want people to feel like they had to be physically with us in order to like cop a piece of merchandise or get a cool t-shirt. Like you could just order the t-shirt if you think it's cool and you want to represent us. You know, I don't even care if you don't run, if you just like want to support Chinatown Runners. I just wanted it to be super accessible. And then all the money that is actually generated from merchandise sales funnels back to the charity of like that specific event that it's aligned to. So I'll also do seasonal merchandise. So I try to create, you know, themes that kind of all tie back to whatever charity or organization we're fundraising for at the moment. But yeah, just some thoughts on like how to make people feel like they're a part of the team. People love swag, so.
I'd say, I guess vendors that are two examples of vendors that have really set the tone or really gave us a bigger picture perspective on how we can show up differently and support. In this case, we launched or ASICS launched a partnership with a tribe called Run, which is the largest BIPOC run club in Baltimore this past weekend. So we hosted the event at our Baltimore store, and we ran around the city of Baltimore 5 miles, returned back. You know, like you said, if they don't have the resources, like, you know, certain run clubs to go out and be able to go to BIPOC-owned, you know, restaurants as well, that they be able to, you know, eat and chill at after the run. We actually just kind of did a circle where we brought them back to the store, and, you know, we provided them with, you know, food, drinks. It was more so it turned into a social in the sense of, you know, with this run club launching this partnership around ASICS as well. But it just shed light on digital opportunities that are there with these run clubs, opportunities where, guys, I know you guys know the importance of like run clubs. I mean, I always look at our retail stores at Charm City Run as an extension of run clubs, because if they're not shopping in the store, you know, or someone has a run shoe on somewhere with the run club, they're influenced by that. So run clubs make a huge impact on this industry that goes unsaid or whatever as well too. But being able to find out different ways to partner with BIPOC run clubs in the community and support them and show up for them in different ways, to where showing them that the access is there for Charm City Run was key for us. So that was one that set the tone to show the ample amount of opportunities that are there. Another one was we teamed up with Brooks last year with the large nonprofit organization called Paul's Place that serves Baltimore as well. And we were more so like the outreach in the sense of like, hey, we'll come to the organization, set up like it's one of our retail stores, and be able to provide 300 plus pairs of Brooks shoes and take them through the Charm City Run experience, right? So the organization, Paul's Place, they acted as the outreach, letting us know just communication wise, how many were going to be there. All of our leaders showed up, and we set up shop like it was one of our retail stores, and taking them through that experience and really, giving back in that sense or whatever, because I mean, it's middle of winter, whatever it may be, it's nothing like at least having a comfortable pair of shoes on as well too, when you're going to these different types of or under-resourced communities. But Brooks helps set the tone for that event. That's going to be something that we continuously do. But yeah, teaming up with run clubs in new and unique ways, and going to our other partners and organizations as well, and we're going to them and setting up versus them coming to us, and it's centered around us is something that we're looking to definitely do moving forward with a lot of our events and things of that sort. So
thank you all. Thank you. This a lot of your answers make me think about the importance of fostering relationships. Like, it's not just about, again, it's not just about the one day. When you think about the communities you're reaching, the vendor relationships you've established, it reminds me of the most recent workshop we did prior to this one was hosted by Jordan Marie Whetstone. It was called No to Run, and she featured her film with Yadika, a runner. I encourage you to go watch that workshop. But one of the phrases she used when she was talking about race events, marathons and whatnot, trying to get in touch with Native and Indigenous communities, she said, foster a kinship. And I feel like that was such a useful phrase, but it's to a familial level. You should get to know these communities. And I think a lot of that carries over to what you all are talking about now. How are we fostering a deep and intentional relationship, not with just the partners that we have and how we can stretch that partnership, but the communities that we want to pour into. So I loved what you all had to contribute there. And I think also for our audience, that previous workshop touches on a lot of this as well. So I encourage you to go back and listen. Moving into data, we love data at the RIDC. We only did 3 research studies just to, let you know how much we really do love it and how important it is. And from our own research, we know that 70% of organizations in the running industry have DEI goals. Only 59% of them, or 59% of them do not track their DEI goals. So majority of the ones who have them don't track progress towards them. And then only 14% publicize those goals or publicize any of that information. So we're here to break that. And we're going to publicize exactly the data we got from the cookout. What we chose to do was a voluntary entry survey. We called it an entry survey because it was right by the door, but it also was conveniently used as a QR code on the menus by the food. It was on the signage about our vendors. It was on the signage about who the RIDC was. It was on everything you looked at was a QR code that brought you to this voluntary survey. A lot of people are hesitant about collecting data, and part of that is they say, we don't want to make people share their personal information. Well, don't make them. Make it voluntary. And with it being voluntary, over 70% of our attendees completed the survey willingly. So that gave us a lot of information. One thing we chose to capture was zip codes, which often don't get considered, but zip codes tell you what areas you've reached. It was in our goals to specifically reach the Austin community. And Austin was one of the top 3 cities that showed up when we tracked zip codes. So we know we successfully reached them. And we also went nationwide. We wanted to pull in people from all over the country, and we did, as you can see here. But we also captured important racial demographics as well. Let me go back. So you can see here that over 35%, at least of our respondents, were people of color, the BIPOC community. So that's over 1/3 of our event. And I can tell you experientially, just from going to running industry events, I think we did pretty good. I don't know that you often see that 1/3 is people of color. Almost never do you see that. Now, the challenge here is I have nothing to compare it to. Unfortunately, I could not put up another chart from, and I'm not just picking at TRE, but at any other running industry event of what their racial demographics were, because they're not shared publicly. Not all, but a lot. So hopefully in the future, we will have more data as we encourage the running industry to share that information. We'll have more data to compare this to. You can always use national demographics, though. That's a great way to tell you just sort of a baseline of where you're at. So that's what we did. And as you can see, glaringly obvious, we still had 64%, over 64% white attendees at an event. We did all this work to aim for specifically racial diversity and inclusion. And I say that because, one, sharing your demographic data is not about shame. Shame is not a very functional tool when it comes to how we improve diversity, equity, or our inclusion efforts. You're sharing your data, sharing this information tells us where we're at. And realistically, we know we're still up against the data or the demographics of the general running industry, which is glaringly white. So compared to that, I think this is somewhat of a success, but it also gives us a clear indicator of where we can grow. And it tells us exactly in what communities we reached, we did well with. Now, I say all this, that, numbers are great, but do not underwhelm the value of subjective data, especially when it comes to inclusion. You need to be able to evaluate people's experience of inclusion. So we included on the voluntary survey a question about, what does the RIDC mean to you? And the fact that these were just a few of the responses, but overwhelmingly, the responses included words like safe, belonging, welcoming. That tells us that even though maybe our numbers weren't all the way there, the experience of inclusion was very real for a lot of people. Now, since a lot of people aren't used to reporting or maybe don't even know what data to capture, starting with you, Lynn, and maybe if anybody else has something to add, Strava is great with data, as they should be. Can you give examples of maybe some things that Strava's tracked, either just within your internal team or with at Camp Strava, that help you improve inclusion efforts, or some examples of ways we can capture data to help empower other people to do that as well?
Yeah, so I can use Camp Strava as a specific example. For those of you who don't know, Camp Strava is our annual flagship event where we bring together community partners, brand partners, and our technology partners, along with community organizers like yourself, bring them together for a day of connection, community, and communication. So last year, we had about 350 people join us for the day, which is a really great number. But what we did as a fast follow was a qualitative post-event survey. We wanted to extend a last touch to our attendees to thank them for their time and coming to the event, but also to hear their thoughts about how did they feel the day went, what did they want to see more of, and what did they really enjoy. From that, what we're able to do is kind of synthesize the results and use it to inform this year's Camp Strava to ensure that we're always working to improve ourselves in mission, in service of our mission, and creating safe places for everyone. So some of the questions we asked were, did you like the topics? What topics would you want to see? Who would you want to see? And having that information gives us a jump start into this year, so we can use it to continue improving year upon year, hopefully.
Does anybody else, thank you for that, Lynn. Does anybody else have like creative ways of how they've captured data? This could be, we did a Google form that we asked people to fill out, but this could also be collecting screenshots of people, who attended your event or things like that, things of that nature.
I would say social listening, see what your attendees are saying during the event and right after the event. People are very quick to let you know when they're not happy, but they're also very quick to let you know when they are happy. So listening to both the sometimes constructive feedback and then the feedback of what you're doing well is going to be really important.
Thank you. Fantastic examples. All right. Well, before we jump into our Q&A, audience, I'm imagining you have questions. If you don't, make one up, make it a good one, and pick a panelist to ask. And use the Q&A feature on this fancy webinar setting to ask your question. But in the meantime, at the RIDC, we admit we don't have all the answers. That's why we are a coalition. If you didn't know what RIDC stood for, the last letter is for coalition. So we're looking to you for answers as well, or just helping us get closer to what those answers could be. So I want you to think back to the question we asked you earlier about what kind of partner do you want to be, or what kind of partnerships are you looking for? And if you're not hosting an event, you can just add feedback on, thinking of what would make a good partnership. What do I imagine the events I want to go to? What partners do I want to see them working with? Can you in the chat comment, what would progress towards whatever your answer was? What would progress towards that look like over the next 3 months? For example, you could say, reaching out to more community organizations in our local area. That would be progress. Or it could be whatever else you want to make up. So please drop that in the chat. And then I'll give you all some time to put your questions in the Q&A feature for our panelists as well. And I will pass to Sergio to facilitate this Q&A and our closing remarks before that, or after that.
Great. Thank you, Abigail. And thank you to all our panelists. I can tell you that just from the comments in the chat, you have been sharing beautiful little nuggets of wisdom, of experience. And we are getting a lot more nuggets coming in through the chat, people sharing their experience and what have they experimented with. So this is what makes that coalition a lot stronger. So thank you all for that participation. I will say that in the Q&A, we don't have questions. Let me check again. We don't have questions, but there is one question that I would love to open for the panelists. And it helps us connect with something else at RIDC. Basically, Ethan, I'm going back to your comment. Ethan, where did I? Oh, here we go. Ethan has been asking. Wow, don't move the chat because I can't find it. There it is. Ethan, if you don't mind, I'm going to read your question. Quote, would love thoughts on how to create more inclusive events on the trails. The barrier to participation are often very different, like transportation, cost, familiarity, or skills, etc. I love to hear from any of y'all who are working on this specifically. Happy to share our experience, but equally psyched to hear what others are doing. And so we will open it for panelists to answer this question if anybody has experience on trail running and how to be more inclusive there. But the conversation that started in the chat is that Larissa and others have been sharing that RIDC, through our research, we also learn why there's less feeling of inclusion and diversity in trail running. And quite honestly, it doesn't have that much to do with transportation or familiarity or skills. It has to do with safety. So on the one hand, I want to say it's very important that we address all of the opportunities to be inclusive. And it's also very important that we address our own perception of what being inclusive is. Because Ethan offered a few potential answers there for less inclusion, but it has nothing to do with what was in the survey. So we invite people to check out the survey. I've shared the link there a few times, but I would love to open it for panelists if anybody has ideas on how do we make trail running more inclusive.
I cannot take credit for anything that I'm about to share. I am good friends with a community leader named Samantha Dong here in New York, and I met her when she started coming to Chinatown Runners, and she created a run club called Asian Trail Mix, which one, amazing, super cute name, and two, she is just a rock star at knowing how to fundraise and connect with brands. So she has just in the last 2 years created a whole community bringing East Asian athletes to the trails. And she kind of runs the gamut, right? She'll host events that are a little bit more accessible to people in the city, like a Central Park trail run, where it's an introductory run, maybe only a couple of miles. She has pacers that she ensures that, you know, there are people, fast runners, all the way to a walking group. So again, like making sure that people feel like they're invited to attend, regardless of their skill level and capability, that it feels safe. They see themselves represented in the guests that are at the events. And she's just very strategic and aggressive with the brands that she partners with and the stores that she hosts her events at as well. But you know, she herself saw a lack of a community for Asian athletes in the trails, and what she did was she just created that. So I think that her story is very inspiring. I just wanted to share that and encourage anybody and everybody who is thinking about doing things like that. If you don't see the thing that you want, then you can be the thing that you want, right? Like create the change that you want. And more likely than not, there is an appetite for it. And I think that you'll be very successful, you know, regardless of, you know, how many people or how much connectivity you think you have. We often underestimate how much power we have in our own individual network, right? It's usually exponential. So that was just one example. I can't take credit for any of it. I'm a terrible trail runner. So I don't do a lot of trail running events, but she was just one example that came to mind, and she's just done a fantastic job with it.
I have another question for the panel from an anonymous person asking, what are you focused on, panelists, for the next year regarding a new tool or policy or whatever for a new approach in 2024 towards creating an inclusive event? Is there any new strategies you're looking at, something new that you're trying to implement or get creative with that you could share?
I get so creating an event that's more inclusive, and a new strategy that I'm considering or that I'm looking to implement will be, we talked about like community-led events, right? And really like getting run clubs together to have conversations about, you know, how can they take ownership in putting on an event that's solely devoted to what it is and what they're for in the community, right? And having to run a race focused and centered around that. I think candid, transparent, just conversations need to be had with it, but that's like a concept that's been floating around as well for a specific event that could be had, but that it takes action, just reaching out. I'm very early in that process, but I know that's something that I've definitely been thinking about, so I don't have all the answers for it now. But when things start to move along, I'll have more thorough info and insight for you. So,
Abigail, we have a few questions now on the Q&A. I'm sorry, Erica, did I interrupt you?
So very quickly, I'll share two things. As I mentioned before, increase accessibility, right? So looking at everything we do, large and small events, beyond ASL, our signage, our wayfinding, toilets, like everything, making accessibility just normalized and less of a surprise, right? Like where I think people are like, oh, I'm surprised there's ASL, or I'm surprised there's a rent. And instead of making it just a part of the operations, it's not an additional piece. So the more that we we expand these offerings and make room for feedback loops so we can hear and understand where we're leaving folks out. And the other is the continued expansion of the New York Road Runners Contributor Circle, which has focused on particularly women, BIPOC women from communities that have not had the microphone to help with storytelling, and not as a one-off, but really a 1 to 2 year commitment, so that we're helping us helping those voices reach more people. And again, that it just becomes like an organic relationship. And that, again, that we're never seen as showing up for an event on the day of an event, the week of an event, that we are seen as a part of community. And so the reminders, New York Road Runners, that we're like excited, extraordinarily proud of the marathon. We are a community-based non-for-profit. And so in addition to the 50 marquee events, we do have our youth programming, Striders for our seniors programming, our Run for the Future, Rising New York Road Runners, is that we're pointing people to come to experience us at the marquee events. We point them back to the community events. So that's great. Thanks so much for showing here. But Open Run, Striders, Race Free for the folks who need, entries, affordability. So we're just, that was a lot. That was more than one thing. So I'll stop talking.
If I could add on to what Erica was saying, I think similar to Victoria, I scroll on social media quite a bit. And I would call myself a fairly new runner. And what I've seen on my algorithm, which might give you an idea of my pace, is pages like The Realistic Runner and runners new to the running community who feel they don't belong to a running group because of their pace. So I think there's a world where inclusion for the running community is also having a pace group that is a little bit quote unquote slower, but also making sure that they don't get left behind and they feel that support all the way through is something that I've seen really resonate on the pages that I'm watching late at night when I should be asleep.
Yeah, just to jump on that train. One of the things that we say at Chinatown Runners at our events is it's a community pace. So rather than trying to call out numbers, because I think your speed is relative, right? Like one person's fast is another person's slow, but it doesn't matter. Our events are not about the physicality of like running really, like I tell people, if you're trying to get your workout in, like it's not, you shouldn't be doing it at our event. Our slogan is stick together like sticky rice, which I know is like cringy, but it resonates and people remember it. And it's things like that that foster, again, that sense of safety, the sense of inclusion and welcoming, because, I even though I've been running forever, I don't consider myself a fast runner. And I don't necessarily feel like if I'm going to a community run that I want to run fast. I think I'm there for the people and the experience. And we encourage people to run at a pace where they can hold conversation and look out for each other as well, right? Because we're running in the open streets of cities. So we also tell people to stick together and look out for each other. And then, yes, we build the routes. I always try to do the recon of running the route myself if I have the luxury to do so as well, to make sure that if there are things like obstructions in the road, that we know that ahead of time, and that I recruit pacers sprinkled throughout the group to make sure that we're accommodating for those things like safety, or if we need to reroute, that we have a game plan to do that. But I've had people come up to me or message me ahead of an event and tell me like, oh, I don't feel like I'm a very fast runner. Like I have to walk run, like, will there be someone there for me? And in those instances, if I anticipate a larger group, I'll often also recruit bike pacers. So folks on bikes that will be in the front and also sweeping in the back. And that just really makes sure, the person in the back feels like they're not left alone and they're not struggling to catch up because they've got somebody with them at all times. So again, I wanted to just echo that that sense of safety just really makes the event so much more welcoming to everybody.
Very thankful for your thoughtful responses. Thank you all. And let's see if we can jump into, we've been addressing some of the questions in the Q&A, but let me read them and I'll give you all some time to respond if you have something. From Melissa Carr, I love the merchandise idea from Chinatown Runners. Does anyone have a list of BIPOC-owned print-on-demand places that we could use? Wouldn't that be nice, Melissa? That's your project, Melissa.
Yeah, I don't have one like, that's amazing. That's a really good idea. Someone should do that. One thing that we found useful when we're trying to print stuff locally for just like a one-off piece of merchandise, is just going to BIPOC neighborhoods, but predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods or predominantly Asian neighborhoods, and seeing what kind of businesses are there. We have found printers in the different Chinatowns throughout New York. FYI, there are over 9 Chinatowns in New York. Most people don't know that. And so sometimes it's just you having to kind of do a little bit of the legwork yourself. But you would be surprised at the diversity of the businesses that you would find in these neighborhoods. And it just takes a little bit of recon.
I'll say for the cookout, I believe we went through a few options on printing. Mind you, we were a little late in the game getting our stuff printed. So we did not use them because they were not great. It was on us. We had a short deadline. I have to go back and see. I think we had at least 2 or 3 BIPOC owned printing companies. So if I find them, when I write the blog about this whole thing afterwards, I'll try to link something about them in that blog. So check our blog.
Thank you. Another question we have from Ayumi: how do we get other race directors, run groups, etc., to buy in to supporting inclusion in their races and groups? And also from the same person, what are specific actions I can take to reach the communities that have no connection to the running community? Oh, this sounds like a great panel for you.
I'm going to try to be PC here. On the race directors and run clubs, I think there's worth the communication effort. Email conversation where you're saying this is important, inclusion, belonging is important to us. Are you willing to do more? I've been a D&I space for a very long time. I'd say the equity space for a long time. If we're not careful, we can spend a lot of time trying to convince folks to do a thing. And sometimes you create your own, or you look to see who in community is doing and partner with them. I think in the current, the balance is some people truly maybe are not aware. And so there's that like pulse check for who wants to do better and who's looking for assistance, versus you can spend a lot of time trying to convince someone who doesn't want to go. So that's why I'm hesitant to give a blanket statement that like it is the inquiry about the willingness to hear, to receive, to pivot and change course. That can help to decide.
And if I may use your cake analogy, is your willingness to try to cook a different cake, your willingness to try new flavors, new ingredients, buy a new oven, get out of that kitchen and go cook in another kitchen, right? Like anywhere in the analogy is your willingness to actually change the formula you've always been using. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I'll jump in here on the second part of that, their second question with specific actions I can take to reach the communities that have no connection to the running community, which I think some of my other panelists might have some great answers for us. So I'm hoping y'all chime in after this. I think as far as the RIDC, that's a big thing we try to focus on too. And Sergio, you actually do a good job about talking about this. The running community can be very secular. We think of running as like the one sport, the one place we can go find runners or people who would be interested in running. But there's a lot of other activities. You bring up like jump rope is a good one, basketball, there's football, there's all these other spaces where people are getting out and moving, or just general parks and recreation spaces where you are finding these other individuals who don't even know that they are runners. Until I had a job in the running industry, actually, I'd say specifically this job, I told everybody I was not a runner, and I run every week, but I don't run marathons. I wasn't running 26 point something miles, that wasn't me. So I counted myself out. But you can reach them in a lot of different ways. So that's one. Another practical option is look at other groups. If you're specifically talking about the BIPOC community, there's already a lot of other groups that have spaces for them. The first one that comes to top of my mind is like historically Black Greek organizations or Latinx organizations or AAPI organizations. They have, they intend to come together. They have community platforms already where they're spending time together. So go there, go find them where they're already meeting. And just try to get creative like that about where are they already at and can I go there?
I mean, from a personal perspective, similar to Abigail, before working in a company that focuses on movement and wellness, I did not consider myself a runner. Some days I still don't. But if you're looking, when you talk about reaching somebody that is not in the running community, I feel like you're talking about me because I feel like I'm adjacent to it, but I am actually in it because I am trying. I do run, I would say small amounts, but I'm running. One of the things that has really worked for me is kind of finding a smaller community before putting myself out into a bigger run community, I would say. So what I've done is recruited my own friends and family to start running and kind of peer pressuring them into it. And now I have signed us all up for a race. So I basically just created my own small community with people I was already comfortable with, who I know are at the same starting point. And from there, like, my hope is that we will continue this past the race. So a lot of it is going to be organic word of mouth.
Love that response, Lynn. Thank you so much for sharing. I also feel you've been addressing this one, but I want to share a question from Sarah Wickman. I would love to hear your perspective on ways to make a space truly welcoming for a beginner runner, whether this is a community run club, a run club from a retail location, or a run club from a retail location. I think what you share, Lynn, is in fact, you are describing yourself, if I may, as part of the running community, but you brought in people not from the running community because that's who you are connected with. So yeah, we have to look outside of that universe sometimes. Yeah. Anybody else have some thoughts on making a truly welcoming for a beginner runner?
I mean, I feel like I've touched upon it a few times on the call, but obviously at our events, like, we try not to use numbers in the pace because I don't want to like pace shame anybody. People have very strong feelings with like the number attached to their running watch or however fast their mile time is. And we don't, while we do use running as the connective tissue that brings the community together, that's not the performance element of it is not what we're focusing on. It's the togetherness and sharing the experience of running, you know, together. So we don't typically use numbers and pace call outs in our event advertising. And then, you know, I try to make sure that we have people posted in the front, the middle, and the back of the group at all times so that truly nobody is like left alone or feeling the pressure to have to like catch up to the main group. Naturally, the larger our events become, like, people kind of break up into little subclusters. And that's completely okay as long as there's somebody that is like knows the route and is aligned with that group so that they kind of feel like they are comfortable enough to run at their own pace, even if they know that there's a few other clusters of our community ahead of them. There's no sense of urgency that they have to catch up or they'll lose us. I also, you know, ahead of the run, will try to share out the route so that anybody who wants to have it on their phone, they can have it at all times and have the information with them so they don't have that, again, like, sense of reliance on making sure they see, you know, one of our runners or the group and have to keep up with us. You know, if they want to stop, if they need to, you know, address something personal, they also always have the address of where we're starting and where we're ending. And usually an approximation of time, because we also invite people who may not necessarily be able to or want to do the run, but want to meet up with us either at the start or the end of the event. We want to make sure that we give those as options as well for that level of participation. So I think really it's just a matter of making sure that people feel supported and you don't feel like you're left alone at any point of the event. I think about it, putting myself in someone else's shoes, and also, having attended run clubs and events where it was advertised as like a community pace. And I was like, oh my God, this is not my community pace. And knowing how that feels is really helpful in structuring how we design our events to make sure that I don't ever make someone feel that way, where they feel intimidated or as though they have to work harder to keep up with us.
If I could add on to what Victoria was saying, something just as you were talking, like something spurred in my mind. I think anybody now, I think if you want to reach people who are not in the running community, use your network to help amplify your message. I've seen so many people do group run reviews of like, this one is actually a really fast community group. I wouldn't go there if you're looking for XYZ. So managing the expectation, but using your members or your runners who come on a regular basis to talk about their experience is another great tactical, almost free way of marketing your group to reach a broader audience.
I would add, as a beginner runner myself, I would love, I shouted out Martinez Evans' book earlier, Slow AF, a run guide to something, I'm butchering the name, but it's called Slow AF. And one thing he offers in there is he's a very relatable runner. He uses very relatable language as if you had no idea what to do when you got out there running, even to basic form. So if you're hosting a marathon or an event for runners, I think I've never seen this, but I would love it if you're offering a pace group for walkers or beginning runners, have someone out there who's like, hey, I can give you a few basic fundamental pointers on form to run, like to make this a more enjoyable experience for you. There's a few little things you can do. Put your chest forward, land, strike on this part of your foot. Try these basic tips so that the run you have today can be better than your other runs. So you're encouraged to come back. And then secondly to that, choosing a runner who looks like, okay, they might be with me. Maybe not choosing your like brand ambassador to go out there like a super fit, Olympian or something, but choosing someone I could relate to give me that kind of basic instruction, I think would make me feel much more confident. Because I think a lot of when we get there, it's I'm going to look silly. I'm going to look like I don't know what I'm doing. And especially for someone working in this industry, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't expose to anybody how terrible I look running. But I would feel much more confident if I had someone give me some tips before the run started.
Let's go on a run, Abigail.
Okay, girl, I'm with you.
We're going to start the post-webinar RIDC virtual runs. Start sharing all over. Very thankful for everybody's time. Your thoughtfulness, your skills, and your experience. You make the RIDC way stronger and more open to everybody to really be part of our coalition. So we're thankful to Erica, Victoria, Lynn, and DeAnthony. And of course, Abigail, thank you for continuing with that mission and vision. You continue to lead the organization in these programs. I'm so glad that we recorded. I love it when we mention a program and we are able to share the recording right there. So this is also a resource for everybody. It's not only coming to the panel, it's check out our website, follow us on social media, on LinkedIn, our website, because all these resources, all these panelists are accessible, their experience is there, and we continue to grow. We only grow thanks to these partnerships and this common work.